cost increase. If the flat roof was done because that is cost savings, I think that's gonna be more appreciated than any pallet change or angle of a roof. If those taxpayers say, you
We
made
should
this
be able to
decision,
have
I don't love it, but I
can live with it.
I can
Yeah.
certainly appreciate it if you're looking to save the taxpayer
We'll
dollars.
give you the differential between the two.
I think the other question on that same front would be, if we go gable, I know we were talking metal roof, does that change, depending on some of the options that we're considering, where you wouldn't be able to necessarily do metal, or does that have any impact
I
to it, I
mean,
guess?
metal roof is a little bit more money, but it's the longevity of the product as well.
Right.
I think, depending on the architectural details that Matt's team comes up with, we'll be able to definitively say, a metal roof does make sense or an asphalt roof makes sense on that particular location. So I think once you give us a couple of dynamics on that, we can probably, it's not hard to show both
No,
styles.
it's not, and alternatively, that's a very easy one to bid as an alternate.
Yeah.
So we can certainly do a base bid of asphalt shingles and ask contractors to provide a price for a metal roof.
Because I do know we communicated as one of the goals of the committee was we want to keep the maintenance costs as low as possible. And that was one of the considerations. And that was pretty well received, I think, to say, hey, you know what, we're okay spending a little bit more on a metal roof than having to replace a shingle roof every
And that
15
would only
years.
be on the admin area.
Right, everything else
So
is
to be
flat,
crystal clear,
yeah,
everything else is
yeah,
rubber roof, so
so, okay.
Sonafill.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay, thanks.
Yep.
All right,
Do you have any floor
Well, Matt, did you
plans?
say you had some
Yeah.
program stuff that changes to show, or?
oh, yeah.
It's just, it's a
Oh.
specific.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, let me jump over to the plans. And there was a kind of a good lead-in on this about saving money, right? So we received some comments from the fire department through Joe's team on a couple of tweaks they were looking for the plans. We sent them to the fire department. I haven't seen any comments on the review that they've done on the revisions yet, so I expect there'll be a few more tweaks down the road. But essentially, we addressed 3 areas of the building. 2 of them were rearrangements, and 1 of them was about reducing square footage. So the first piece about reducing square footage, we have effectively reduced 300 square feet out of the training room. And what we did is reduce the overall capacity from 75 to 60? 62. And adding a room divider in it so that it allows for a little bit more flexibility. So what you're seeing here is that reduction in overall square footage of the training room. And then you see here in dashed a second set of tables and chairs. So this is showing an arrangement in full capacity of the room, and then room divider, sort of a folding partition that can close that off and make it into 2 separate training rooms. So adds a little bit more flexibility for the fire department or for the community's use. And we also took 300 square feet out of there. We also reduced a good chunk of square footage equally. So this wall sort of came plan east, and then equally, we also pulled this wall in as well and reduced the overall capacity of the fitness room. So I think altogether, we reduced about 450, 500 square feet from the building. So considerable dollars saved there without sacrificing much.
That reduces the future space on top by the same amount, right?
Correct.
So, okay.
Yes.
Does that give us about 4,500 then for that piece?
Yeah.
'Cause I think, okay.
Yep, right around there. The other thing we did is we simply rearranged a number of the administrative spaces. So previously we had EMS, lieutenant, captain. The chief had a corner office over here, deputy chief, chief. There was a meeting room between them, and then fire prevention was up in the corner. We moved fire prevention right next to the EMS walk-off room. That office tends to have the most public foot traffic, so it made sense to keep that right near the entrance in the vestibule. Lieutenant's office, captain's office, the EMS coordinator, chief's in the corner here, and then a meeting room and the deputy's chief's office. We also made some tweaks over to the decon space. We originally had the gear extractor and gear dryer in this corner, and then we had lockers over here. We moved the gear extractor and gear dryer directly off of the entrance to the decontamination space, and then the gross decon shower is directly right over here.
That was direct feedback from the department, just because how they come off of an event, come out of the apparatus and be able to get rid of their contaminated clothes initially and then get into what they need to do.
Yep. On the second floor, so one area that we haven't yet worked on here is this roof access piece and switching that with mechanical and electrical room. So we're going to flip-flop these two. Pretty simple change, not too much to discuss on that one. The other piece we did is we wanted to increase the living quarters over here, the living, dining, and kitchen area, without adding square footage to the building. They wanted to have a few more seats at the day room, and they wanted a few more seats at the dining room table. We did that by extending the floor area here over the lobby. So if you
It was
recall,
askew a little bit.
yeah, on the ground floor, this wall here kicks up at an angle mirroring Prospect Street and the apparatus bays. On the second floor, we just sort of squared that off to give them a little bit more space in those. It adds no real increase in cost except for a little bit of extra concrete for the extension of the slab. Our structural system below this is orthogonal to this portion of the building, so it's not like we're adding some different beam angle or something like that that's going to try to take that load. It's already worked into the structure. That was a pretty low-cost change that increased the amount of space that the fire department had usable. So simply just change the configuration of the kitchen a little bit. They wanted to add some pantry space, which they didn't have in the previous plan. Again, increase the size of the dining table and increase the amount of seating in the living quarters, just to match the amount of crews, the amount of staff that's going to be on a crew shift.
Looking at it from a mechanical side, why do you want to flip-flop the mechanical room to the front of the building?
They wanted to have the roof rack on the, it's not south side, but on the opposite side, because that would be facing the street area. And I can go over detail exactly the parameters around that.
Okay, I'm just thinking as, obviously that we don't know what's going in there yet, but if anything is coming up through the roof, you're going to have that coming on the front side of the building now instead of the back side of the building.
Yep.
That's gotta be worked out. 100%.
Other questions?
So that glass goes away then at the second floor?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so we'll find it, to Joe's point, it does do a really nice job of sort of breaking up the two masses, but I think
Still do that.
we can achieve that
Like
architecturally.
spandrel glass or something, so
Yeah.
from the outside it looks
We could, yeah.
a little nicer
Yeah.
than just mechanical?
Yeah, I would, depending on how, what mechanical system we end up going with or something like that, I'm sure there'll be some louvers or something like that we'll have to accommodate. And if we went with a spandrel system, we can unitize, some louvers into that pretty
With some
reasonably.
natural light in there as well.
And then below that on the first floor is going to be open, you said?
No, below,
Still be.
below here on the first floor is where the radio room is.
Oh, okay.
Other questions? Okay. All right, thanks. Next up, OPM updates.
Sure, I want to go over a few things with you. So we went over the charrette, we went over the drawing updates. The financial update, I provided everybody with a budget. We went in front of the select board and just discussed the probability or possibility of utilizing some of the free cash. They were unanimously in favor of trying to reduce the cost for the taxpayers, which we got a set value of about $5 million. Is that the number? And we're going in front of the finance committee just to present to them and discuss and hopefully get their support on it as well as far as tomorrow night. One of the things that they, during the charrette, and they were asking about cost, but at the select board meeting, they wanted us to make sure that we could definitively see what the impact to the taxpayer would be. The chief's been working diligently, not only with, finding out what the use of free cash or any impact at all, which there would be none towards your rating. But he also looked at what the values were and did a pretty detailed spreadsheet on that. So we'll be able to utilize that information and provide it in the trifold that we can send out to the residents and have them grab. Some of the updated questions from the shred, I'd like to make sure that collaboratively, the committee and the chief and their team puts together the most frequent asked questions that we can provide answers to. So the one thing it's challenging is the word I want to use, is that, the same questions will get asked even though the information is being put out there. I just want to make sure we're identifying that specifically, especially if the same question is asked 15 times. I want to make sure we get it out and provide a clear, definitive answer on that. And I think those public forums, we should be able to do that really carefully and tactfully and essentially transparently, so everybody feels comfortable with how we're going to be doing and what we're doing moving forward. I did express to the select board and the chief, and I'm going to express it again to the committee, the tariffs that are currently in place, are having a little bit of effect, even though nothing's been awarded yet. It's like anything else when they say costs are going to go up on anything. And it's not just the structural steel, it's any of the steel, aluminum, all of the copper components that might be within any of the electrical and mechanical systems may be affected. We're showing right now and I met with our estimating group just to talk it through. It's like a 0.5% on steel, so it's not significant, but it's something, and we're gonna track that. I'm hoping the activities that happen over the next 6 months, it's posturing so that we can get better value for whatever he's trying to do with these tariffs, and it kind of neutralizes. The other aspect of it is we may want to do some early purchases, early packages for some of this stuff. So the sooner the design is ready after we get approval at town meeting, the earlier we can start to put these packages together and maybe get early bid packages out, so that will save the project money over a certain period of time. Those long lead items we were talking about, switch gears, generators, structural steel, any mechanical systems that might, see a significant increase over the next 3 to 6 months. The trifold information, we really, by March 3rd, I'm hoping that we can at least identify, the 10 or 12 or 15 questions along with the financial impact that we're going to be showing. Some of the questions that I saw during the shred is, the need for the fire station. I think you've done that. You've done a phenomenal job, the reasons why you need the building. I think we need to bring it home on the public forum, the one in March and April, to really, and that's why I think the demographics of the town, we need to go to a couple different locations, because you need to hit wherever they are to let them know, what the impacts are and some of the information that we're trying to provide to them.
Just a comment on that, could we consider using the middle school as one of the public forum sites, and then you could just walk everybody over here?
Yeah, I think we can probably, over the next day or so,
Yeah.
we'll hone those locations. I know the chief's been working with a lot of different groups, talking with a lot of, I want to say it was American Legion was a group that you're trying to find out.
Yeah, we're trying to get like the Elks, the Legion.
Yeah, the Elks.
The Masons, we're trying to pin down some dates so we can kind of do some things at their buildings
Yeah.
for their members.
And the seniors are important, because, they're probably the most concerned about any impact on any type of, increase on, so. And the last thing I'm just gonna bring up is that we're looking to have borings and test pits done on Friday of this coming week. Matt's office put together a detailed, a rough locations of where these test pits and borings are gonna be. I'm gonna probably need some assistance from the DPW on the test pits, but I also might need them to help clear some of the site to get the drill rig in place.
They're all set.
Oh, they are, great. The other portion of it is the locality of the borings and test pits are approximate locations. The survey is not gonna be able to get out there in time, so between the chief, us, and the designer, and maybe the DPW, if we could put some cones out he's given us some specific measurements off of certain property lines. We should be able to scale that out pretty quickly to have that done for Friday. It seems like hopefully, knock on wood, the weather holds off and we're able to get that done, but I'll keep you posted as we move closer to it. Connor's been working closely with the geotech group coming in and the boring, and we'll try to have that happen. And that was the last item I was bringing to your attention.
Questions?
We're gonna notify anyone about the test pits and borings?
As far as it's an open site, and they're really not, it shouldn't be affecting anywhere other than the proximity of building location. We're doing apparatus bay, admin area, just for gradation and soil conditions more than anything. So I don't think, DigSafe has already been notified, so most of that is being done as we speak. We didn't notify any of the butters, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I meant like for the town, because we're gonna see equipment out there, a drill rig is.
And
you
maybe
know,
we can just
pretty
do
heavy.
an email. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And then as far as just back to the timeline here, so with the vote, late spring, when would we be in a position, you think, to do the early packages based on the design?
Magic question, Matt. So it's typically, and I've pinned, Jeff and Matt have been, great to work with. We figured about 10 months from the time you got approval to get a rough set of drawings. So typically, early packages, we're starting to understand the systems around design development to 75% drawings. Typically, I like early packages to go out around 75% because we already know the mechanical and structural aspects of it. But you can elaborate on that point. I'm just giving you my insight on it.
Yeah, no, I would concur with that. We just did something very similar in Peabody for their police station, and we did at 30% drawings. We did an early site package. That's because we had blasting and we were across the street from a middle school. And then at between 60 and 75%, we went out for bid for switchgear generator, some of the other long lead electrical componentry for the building, structural steel, and a few others. So that's around when we would want to do that. We wouldn't want to do it too early. We would just be at risk for maybe backing ourselves into a hole, especially with electrical stuff. We really need to understand the entire impact of the building systems, and it takes a little while to develop that. So if we're
9
looking at
months.
75%, and we're talking about probably a June start to get into the production effort. We're looking around October, November timeframe, and probably have those bid packages in hand after the first of the year.
Okay. And that our budget that we talked about, that have escalation through that timeline?
Yeah.
And it did, okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
through midpoint of construction.
Oh, great, awesome, thank you.
Welcome.
Are there other questions? Comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a question, but I just want to follow up a little more on Joe's report about the financials, and just to let the committee know that Mark and Greg and Joe were before the Board of Selectmen this past Monday to present the financial plan, which would call for or the request to utilize potentially $5 million from free cash, which would bring the borrowing amount to $25 million. Although the board did not take a vote on it that night, I think that there was widespread support across from the board members. They all spoke positively on it. The plan, regardless, was to go to the Finance Committee to speak with them about it. But purposely, the board did not take a position because they want the Finance Committee to weigh in on it. And sort of, I guess, surprisingly, one of the questions that came out of that meeting was, what does the financial impact look like if we potentially used more than $5 million from free cash? And the number that was thrown out that night was 8. What if we used 8 instead of 5? We did check with Unibank. Even using that portion would not affect the bond rating. And we do have the numbers that we'll be presenting to the Finance Committee tomorrow as well. So ultimately, tomorrow, what we're looking for out of the Finance Committee is to see if there is support from the Finance Committee to create a financial strategy that would utilize a portion of free cash anywhere from 5 to, we'll call it 8, because that's that was the number that the selectmen threw out, We have numbers right down to 20 million from Unibank. So if we were to potentially use 10 million from free cash, and we have those numbers at every $1 million equivalent. So if we borrowed 20, 21, 22, so on, we have what the financial impact is on an annual basis. So there's more to come on that. So I think the timeline as far as the financial strategy, just to kind of sum it up with what Joe's talking about, even with the trifold, is the hope is that we can potentially get a position and a vote out of a recommendation out of Finance Committee tomorrow, which will then allow us to go back to the board at their next meeting, report back to whatever position Finance took, get the BOS to either support or go with a different direction potentially. And then that will finalize the financial strategy that will allow us to talk a little more confidently and intelligently to what the borrowing strategy would be, not only in the public forums, but in the trifolds. So.
And to add to the chief's point, to be crystal clear, we thoroughly and explained the impact of when it would actually hit the town. And, the time frame isn't in 26 or 27, because the short-term borrowing that we're going to be doing during that period of time, I believe it was 2028 that we were talking around the date that, the first impact would happen on that. And it would all depend on, what they're willing to utilize out of free cash to reduce the overall costs.
Yeah.
So,
And then
that was good news.
yeah, and then basically the more free cash the town can put in, the lower the borrowing, the lower the tax impact would be. So it's really now a discussion. I think it was very positively received of, we're in a position to do this, to keep the tax impact as low as possible. And now it's just, what's the number? And maybe a little bit about where it comes from, because there's free cash, there's stabilization fund. There's a lot more free cash than stabilization, so it probably would all come from there. But that's also, I think, up for the finance committee to kind of recommend, as well as, I don't know if there's benefits to, like, if we take a little out of stabilization and then put it back, does that make us look better than just letting it sit there, or things like that, right? So that would be a consideration, but really it's just down to, like, what is the final number going to be? And I think once we get that, that allows us to prepare, hey, this is the, from now until the vote, this is the number, this is the, the impact. We'll be able to have that all in one place and shout it from the rooftops, I guess. So.
And as I explained to the select board, I give credit to the town of Auburn, because you're in a great position to be able to utilize, and that's what that infrastructure is all about for your capital expenses that you're using it for, and being able to reduce it. You're the second town in 6 months that's used that strategy and successfully have been able to get a building done under that, those parameters. So I commend the town for their financial stability.
Good. Other questions on project?
Just administratively, if the finance committee tomorrow votes to use additional funds, does that go back to us to vote to move forward with that, or does that?
I think actually we can just sort of agree that we've made a recommendation of up to five, but if ultimately it's the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board that would decide,
Right.
What that
warrant's gonna
amount
say.
is and what would go on the warrant, right? So if the Finance Committee came back and said, we think 8 is a great number, and then we would take that, we'll take that to the next Board of Selectmen and say, Finance Committee thinks 8's the right number. I think we're all in agreement that as long as it's at least 5, then we're fine. I don't think anybody here is opposed to, if there's more non-borrowed money available to put towards this. So
Yeah.
I think we would just say, hey, it's, this is what the Finance Committee recommends. So, take a vote on it, and then we'll know.
And Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, just borrowing that $5 million saved over $1.7 million in interest? Is that what
I think it was 1.8.
1.8? I knew it was
Yeah.
over 1.8.
Yeah, correct. It was 1.8 by just utilizing the 5. But even right now, if we were to just use $5 million from stabilization, and we look at a $25 million borrowing, on the average home, which is valued at $420,000, it would be $216 annually. There is and then even if we were to just utilize an additional million, so if we were to use 6, that drives the number under 200. It brings the number to 195. And there's about a $60 difference going right down to the $10 million mark. Now, do I anticipate that there's going to be a recommendation on either side to do 10 million? I don't. I don't. I think 8 is probably the realistic cap. But even at 8, that puts that borrowing at about 179. It puts it at about $179 a year at the 8.
Yeah, I think just the impression from the discussion that I got is, we have a certain amount of free cash available. 8 is probably about what they'd want to spend out of that and still hang on to other things in case there are future needs, where free cash might, help, like opportunistic things like buying the Prospect Street property was, a thing because we had the cash, because of the way we managed the policies. So, so I wouldn't expect to get 10. I think that would be a lot out of, what we have. But I think 8 was definitely a number that was seriously being considered, so.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, it's important for the committee to know, and the public as a whole, too, is one of the reasons why I think that they're interested in entertaining this discussion on not only the 5 million, but potentially going to 8, is since we borrowed the 4.6, more than half of that has already been restored back to stabilization with returns and all that. So more than half of the cost of the 4.6 has already been returned back to the stabilization fund. So the return on rate is good, which is why I think that they're okay with this concept of utilizing, a portion of that stabilization.
Other questions? Comments? Great, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next up, any other discussion topics for the committee that, I know we're starting to think about meeting with, having various public forums, starting to socialize, communicate. I think, we've talked a little bit, kind of timelines of, I think maybe by the next meeting, we probably should have all of our information finalized, right? So building, what it's basically going to look like, financing, all of that should be organized, and then it's really about pulling that together into digestible content that we can, get out to as many people as possible. I think we should probably start thinking about, and I think we have started thinking about, like, who should we be meeting with, where. I think there's, certainly, outreach we can do online. There's outreach we can do in person. I know the suggestion was made, maybe we could camp the high school gym for basketball on Saturdays with, so I'm thinking there's probably, in addition to a trifold, maybe we have a, a posterized version of that we could set up shop at various places in the mall or in the, at a basketball Saturday or,
Too late for that.
Any major event coming up?
I was gonna say, I think we're too
No.
late
We're
for
in the spring
basketball.
sports. Be ready to be
Yeah.
at softball,
it'll be
baseball, soccer.
Yeah.
Well, we could camp out at Pappas. I mean, that's,
The craft fair and basketball game is coming up in March.
yeah, I think there is a.
Having a
craft
table
fair.
is a good way to just get your message out there with some boards.
Yep, and just,
And then having the pamphlets handed out, and showing the cost impacts, we'll have those numbers by then. It just reinforces, your transparency that you're putting out there.
yeah, and just the consistency of message, I think,
Yep.
is what we're, looking to develop by next meeting. So, I mean, I think we're open to brainstorming other ideas, to get out in front, but I do think that it's gonna be important that we just blanket the town with the information, at the library, at the, at wherever people are gonna be congregated, craft fairs, sporting events, I don't know, things like that, high school events,
Town
those
hall.
kinds of things, town hall. Yeah, and just, wherever people are congregating, I think is where we wanna at some point be able to just put some posters up and say, this is the information, if you have any questions, please ask, right? So,
Greg, I think just about every public building and commercial building has one of these running some sort of messaging. If we can get on their rotation of, you know, even if it's a slide, just to make people an awareness thing that this project is here and these are some of the things. It's all great to say we're all gonna go, you know, volunteer and stand out at 400 events come this spring, but it may not be the reality. But if we can put a nice presentation together that runs on a loop somewhere at all the schools and in the lobbies, and reach out to the Chamber of Commerce and ask them to run some stuff in their lobbies, and
We've filmed each of those events that we have, those public forums moving forward, and then having those run, because some of the questions I get asked between Matt, myself, and the chief, and our team, it puts a lot of clarity into some of the misconceptions that might be out there when those questions are asked, and then it's retaped and played over for the people who weren't in attendance.
Mm.
So, just take that under consideration.
any other topics to discuss today? Okay. Are there any public comments? Okay. With that, next meeting would be Monday, March 3rd, here, 5:30. And I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Okay. All right, we are adjourned.